May all beings be happy. May all beings be joyful. May all beings be in peace. With infinite love, we are going to read for you The Three Mountains by Samael Aun Weor. Let's get started, my dear brothers and sisters. 4 words to the listeners. Without wishing to hurt any delicate feelings, we must emphasize that venerable institutions exist within the cultural spiritual environment of contemporary humanity that sincerely believe that they know the secret path, while nonetheless they do not. Allow me the freedom of saying with great solemnity that we do not wish to make destructive criticisms. We emphasize, nothing more, and this is not a crime. Obviously, because of simple, deep respect for our fellow men, we would never say anything against any mystical institution. Human beings cannot be criticized for not knowing something that has never been taught to them. The secret path has never been revealed publicly. In terms which are rigorously Socratic, we would like to point out that many scholars who pretend to know thoroughly the path of the razor's edge not only do not know it, but ignore the fact that they do not know it. Without wishing to point at any spiritual organization, and without intending to hurt anyone, we shall simply say that the learned ignoramus not only does not know, but also that he does not know that he does not know. References to the secret path appear in many ancient sacred texts. There it is, cited and mentioned in many verses. However, people do not really know it. The purpose of this work that you have in your hands, dear reader, is to show and teach the esoteric path leading to the final liberation. This is, then, 1 more book of the 5th Gospel. Goethe, the great German initiate, said, "Theories are gray, only the tree with golden fruits is green." And this is really life. In this new book we only provide transcendental, living experiences, that which we have verified, that which we have experienced directly. The maps of the path must be drawn now, each step indicated with precision, the dangers pointed out, etc. Some time ago the guardians of the Holy Sepulchre told me, "We know that you are departing, but before you go you must leave for humanity the maps of the path and your own words." I answered by saying, "This is exactly what I will do." From that instant I undertook, in a solemn manner, to write this book. Chapter 1. My childhood. It is not irrelevant to solemnly affirm that was born with an enormous spiritual restlessness. It would be absurd to deny this. To many it would appear unusual and unbelievable that there are some that can remember the totality of their existence, including their birth. I want to assert that I am one of them. Very clean and beautifully dressed, I was placed in the maternal bed next to my mother after all the usual natal processes. A smiling giant approached the sacred bed and looked at me. He was my father. It is important to assert clearly now that in the dawn of existence we walk. Originally on 4 legs, then on 2 and finally on 3. Of course, the last one is the walking stick used by the old. I was not in any sense an exception to this general rule. When I was 11 months old, I felt the desire to walk. I managed to keep myself upright on my feet. I still remember that marvelous instant in which, interlocking my hands on my head, I solemnly made the Masonic sign of assistance, Alibi Eni Almana. And since I have not yet lost the capability to be astonished, I must say that what happened then appeared to me to be marvelous. It is doubtless an extraordinary event, to walk for the first time with the body given to us by Mother Nature. Calmly I went to the old window from which one could clearly see the people who, here and there, appeared and disappeared in the picturesque old street of my village. My first adventure consisted of holding firmly on to the iron grill in that old window. Luckily my father, a very prudent man, anticipating the danger, had put a wire grill in the balustrade so that I would not fall into the street. How well I remember that old window in that old house. That old house where I took my first steps. Of course, at that delightful age I enjoyed the charming toys that children like to play with, but this in no way interfered with my meditation practices. During those first years of life, in which one learns to walk, I used to sit meditating in the Oriental style. Then I used to study in a retrospective fashion my past reincarnations, and many persons visited me from the past. When the ineffable ecstasy concluded and I returned to the normal everyday state, I contemplated with pain the old walls of that paternal house where, in spite of my age, I appeared to be a strange monk. How small I felt in front of those rough walls. I cried, yes, as children cry. I used to complain, repeating, again, in another physical body. Life is so painful. It was at those moments that I used to ask my mother to help me, and she said, the child is hungry, or thirsty, etc., etc. I have never been able to forget those moments in which I used to run happily along the lonely corridors of my house. The most unusual cases of transcendental metaphysics started to happen to me at that time. My father was calling me standing at the door of his bedroom. I saw him in his night clothes, and when I tried to approach him, he disappeared into some unknown dimension. However, I must confess that this type of psychic phenomenon was quite well known to me. I simply came into his bedroom, and after verifying directly that his physical body was asleep in the perfumed mahogany bed, I said to myself, the soul of my father is outside because his physical body is asleep at this time. Silent movies were starting to make an appearance at that time, and people used to meet at the public square at night to entertain themselves watching movies in the fresh air on a rudimentary screen, a sheet stretched taut and nailed between two sticks kept at the right distance. At home, I had a very different movie house. I used to shut myself up in a dark room and fix my gaze on the wall. After a few moments of spontaneous and pure concentration, the wall became illuminated as if it were a multidimensional screen, while the details of the wall itself disappeared totally. From the infinite space appeared living landscapes of great nature, playful gnomes, sylphs from the air, salamanders of fire, spirits from the water, nereids from the immense sea, happy creatures that played with me, infinitely happy beings. My movie house was not silent, and it did not need Rudolph Valentino or the famous white kitten of the old days. My movies had sound, and all the creatures that appeared on my special screen sang or spoke in the pure, divine, original language that like a golden river runs under the forest filled with sun. Later on, as my family multiplied, I invited my innocent brothers and sisters, and they shared with me this incomparable happiness, watching the astral figures on the extraordinary wall of my dark room. I have always been a sun worshipper, and at dawn as well as at the nightfall I used to climb onto the roof of my house. In those times balconies did not exist, and sitting down on the baked mud tiles in the oriental manner as a child yogi, I contemplated the Sun King in a state of ecstasy, falling into a deep meditation. My noble mother suffered many scares when she saw me walk around on the roof. Whenever my elderly father opened the old door of the wardrobe, I felt as if he was going to give me that strange purple jacket which displayed golden buttons. That was an old garment which used to be worn by old knights, and which I have worn in my ancient incarnation, in which I was called Simeon Bleller. Sometimes I imagined that in that old wardrobe one could find sabers and foils from the olden times. I do not know whether my father understood me. I thought that perhaps he could obtain some of these objects from a past existence for me. The old man would look at me, and instead of such garments he would give me a cart to play with, a toy from the innocent happiness of my childhood. Chapter 2. Religion. Having been raised with good manners, I must say that I was educated in the official religion of my people. I always found it unacceptable to play about in the back rows while the liturgical services were taking place. Since my childhood, I have possessed a sense of veneration and respect. I never shrugged my shoulders in the middle of a service. I never tried to get out of performing my sacred duties, or laughed, or tried to mock the holy things. Without wanting to entangle myself among thorns and brambles, I will only say that in a particular mystical sect its name is not important. I found some religious principles that are common to all confessional religions in the world. It is convenient to summarize these principles, for the good of the great cause. Heavens. We find them in every confessional religion, even if they have different names. However, there are always 9 of them, as affirmed with such accuracy by the Florentine Dante in his classic poem, The Divine Comedy. 1. Heaven of the moon, astral world. 2. Heaven of Mercury, mental world. 3. Heaven of Venus, causal world. 4. Heaven of the Sun, Buddhic or intuitional world. 5. Heaven of Mars, Atmic world, region of Atman. 6. Heaven of Jupiter, Nirvana. 7. Heaven of Saturn, Paranirvanic world. 8. Heaven of Uranus, Mahaparanirvanic world. 9. Heaven of Neptune, Empyrean. These heavens are also inside us, here and now, and they interpenetrate. Without confusion. It is obvious that these 9 heavens are located in 9 superior dimensions. We are talking, of course, about 9 parallel universes. Hells. In this Christmas message of 1972 to 1973, it is appropriate to remember the various religious hells. Let us remember with a solemn feeling the multiple prehistorical and historical hells. Everywhere we can find remembrances of hells which are Chinese, Muslim, Buddhist, Christian, etc., etc. It obviously follows that all of these diverse hells are a symbol of the submerged mineral kingdom. Clearly Dante, the marvelous disciple of Virgil, the poet of Mantua, discovered. With mystical surprise the intimate relationship that exists between the 9 Dantesque circles and the 9 heavens. The Bardo Thodol, the Tibetan book of the spirits of the other world, stands out, magnificent, in front of our eyes, allowing us to see the harsh reality of the infernal worlds inside the planetary organism in which we live. It is certain that the 9 Dantesque circles inside the Earth correspond scientifically to the 9 infradimensions submerged under the tridimensional region of Euclid. The cosmic existence of the infernal worlds in every world of infinite space is clear and unmistakable. Obviously, the existence of the mineral submerged kingdom is not an exception in the case of planet Earth. Angelology. The whole of the cosmos is directed, invigilated and animated by a nearly never-ending series of hierarchies of conscious beings. Each one of them has a mission to carry out. They are messengers, known by any of a set of various names, Dayanchohans, angels, devas, etc., only in the sense that they are agents of the karmic and cosmic laws. They vary enormously in their respective degrees of consciousness and intelligence, and they are all perfect men in the most complete sense of the word. The divine love is characterized by multiple angelical services. Each Elohim works at his specialty. We can and should appeal to the angelical protection. God. Every religion is a precious pearl set in the golden thread of the divinity. The love that all mystical institutions of the world feel for the divine is manifest, Allah, Brahma, Tao, Zen, IAO, ANRI, God, etc., etc. Religious esotericism does not teach any manner of atheism, other than in the sense implied by the Sanskrit word nastika. There is to be no acceptance of idols, including the anthropomorphic god of the ignorant. It would be absurd to believe in a celestial dictator, sitting up there on his throne of tyranny, throwing lightning and rays against this sad human anthill. Esotericism admits a logos or collective creator of the universe, an architect. Demiurge. It is unquestionable that this demiurge is not a personal deity as many wrongly suppose, but only the collectives of the Dayan Chohans, angels, archangels, and the rest of the forces. God is God's. It is written in characters of fire in the glittering book of life that God is the army of the voice, the great word, the logos. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things were made by him, and without him nothing of that which was made would have been made. It is obvious that an authentic man who actually achieves perfection joins the current of sound, the celestial militia constituted by the Buddhas of compassion, angels, planetary spirits, Elohim, Rishi Prajapatis, etc., etc. We have been told emphatically that the logos makes a sound, and this is obvious. The demiurge, the logos, is a perfect multiple unity. Whoever worships the gods, whoever surrenders worship onto them is more capable of capturing in a better way the deep significance of the various divine aspects of the architect demiurge. When humanity began to mock the holy gods, then it fell mortally wounded into the coarse materialism of this iron age. Lucifer. We can and must radically eliminate every subjective psychic aggregate of a dark and perverse nature from within ourselves. However, it is unquestionable that we would never be able to dissolve within ourselves the shadow of the intimate logos. It is clear and evident that Lucifer is the antithesis of the creator demiurge, its living shadow projected into the profound depths of microcosm man. Lucifer is the guardian of the door and the keys to the sanctuary, so that only those that have been anointed and hold the secret of Hermes can enter it. Since we have just written this name, so hateful for the pious ears of common people, it is necessary to clarify the fact that the esoteric Lucifer of the archaic doctrine is the opposite to what the theologians, such as the famous Damausazos and the Marquis of Mireville, mistakenly suppose, since he is an allegory of righteousness, symbol of the highest sacrifice, Christos Lucifer, of the Gnostics and the god of wisdom under an infinite number of names. Light and shadow, mysterious symbiosis of the solar word, multiple perfect unity. INRI is Lucifer. Demons. Those divine logoi that committed the unforgivable error of falling into animal generation when reincarnated in human bodies, are depicted in the various religious theologies as if they had been punished. These dark genies are the fallen angels, authentic demons in the most complete sense of the word. It is absurd to affirm that these rebels would have given the mind to man. It is obvious that these angels are truly cosmic failures. It is appropriate now to remember the inhuman names of Andromlech, Belial, Moloch, Baal, etc., whose horrendous abominations can be studied by any adept of the White Lodge in the Akashic records belonging to nature. Let us distinguish between an esoteric fall and a descent. It is evident that these rebel angels did not descend, they fell, and this is different. Limbo. Being knowledgeable in universal history, we are aware that the Orco of the classical Greeks and Romans is actually the limbo of the Christian esotericists. We emphasize here the transcendental idea that the limbo is the antechamber room for the infernal worlds. All caves that are known now, or are to be known in the future, form a vast and uninterrupted network that embraces the whole of the planet Earth, constituting the Orco of the classics as we indicated some lines above, the authentic limbo of Gnostic esotericism, the other world, that is, the place where we live after death. That terrible mystical allegory that says, those innocent children that died without having received the waters of baptism live here, corresponds to the limbo. In Gnostic esotericism, these waters give rise to a genesis, and constitute the ens seminis, the essence of the semen, as indicated by Paracelsus. The sacramental baptism of the various religious rites symbolizes the sex yoga, the methuna, the sexual magic. The key to salvation can be found in the marrow and in the semen, and everything that does not follow this path is certainly a waste of time. Innocent children are those saints that did not work with the spermatic waters of the first instant, virtuous people who thought it possible to achieve the intimate self-realization of the being without fulfilling the commitment of the sacrament of baptism. They did not know sexual magic, or, emphatically, they rejected it. Only Mercury, the Lord and Summoner of souls, holding the caduceus of knowledge, can call again to life these unhappy innocent creatures precipitated into the Orco. Only him, the arch-magician and hierophant, could cause them to be reborn in a propitious environment for the fruitful and creative work in the forge of the Cyclops. This is the way in which Mercury, the harbinger and sun wolf, causes the souls of limbo to join the celestial militias. Purgatory. Let us define purgatory in the following manner: molecular inferior region, zone of sublunar type, submerged astral, secondary kamaloka. In the purgatorial world we must incinerate the seeds of evil, annihilate the infrahuman larvae of all kinds, purge us of corruption, and radically purify ourselves. When writing about purgatory, Dante Alighieri says, "We advanced until we reached a place which at first had appeared to be merely a gap, like a breach dividing a wall, and I saw a gate, towards which it was possible to climb by 3 steps of different colors, and a warder that as yet spoke not a single word. As I looked at him more intently, I saw that he was seated on the uppermost step, His face was so bright that I could not fix my sight on him. He had in his hand a naked sword, which so reflected its rays towards us that it was in vain that I tried to look at it. "Say from there, what do you want?" He started to say, "Where is your escort? Take care that your arrival is not ill-fated." "A heavenly lady, who knows about these things," my master replied, "has told us not long ago. Go there, that is the gate." "Happily, she guides your path," replied to the courteous warder. "Come forward, then, and mount our steps." We came forward. The first step was made of white marble, so polished and solid that I could see my reflection on it. The second, darker than turquoise, was made of black and rough stone, split through its length and breadth. The third, standing above the rest, appeared to be made of a porphyry as red as the blood that flows along the veins. The angel of God rested both his feet on this step, and was seated on the lintel, which appeared to be made of diamonds. My guide led me willingly along the 3 steps, saying, "Ask with humility to withdraw the bolt." Devoutly, I knelt before the holy feet. I struck my chest 3 times, and then I asked him to open up, for the sake of mercy. He traced 7 times on my forehead with the point of his sword the letter P, and said, "Try to wash away these wounds once you are inside." Immediately he got from under his garment, which was the color of ash or of the dry earth, 2 keys, one of which was made of gold, the other of silver. First with the white one and then with the yellow one, he did on the door what I wished. When one of these keys fails and does not turn rightly in the lock, he told us the entrance does not open. One of them is more precious, but the other requires more art and intelligence before opening up, because it is the one that moves the spring. Peter gave them to me, warning me that it was preferable to err in opening rather than to keep it locked, provided that the sinners kneel at my feet. Afterwards, he pushed the door towards the sacred enclosure, saying, "Come in, but I must warn you that anyone who looks backwards returns outside." Then the pivots of the sacred door, metallic, strong, sonorous, turned in their hinges. The tarpeian roared not so loud, nor showed itself so stubborn when the god Metellus was taken from it, so that it was left bare. I heard a sound, and it appeared that I could hear voices that sang accompanied by some sweet melodies, Te Deum Laudamus. What I could hear gave me the same impression one sometimes gets when people are singing with an organ, and the words are now distinguished, now lost. The Divine Comedy by Dante, Purgatory, Canto 9. The Divine Mother. Mary, or better Ramayo, is the same Isis, Juno, Demeter, Ceres, Maya, the divine cosmic mother, the serpentine power that underlies the living base of all organic and inorganic matter. Mary Magdalene. Without any doubt, the beautiful Magdalene is the same Salambo, Matra, Ishtar, Astarte, Aphrodite, and Venus. The solar aura of the reformed Magdalene consists of all priestess wives in the world. Blessed are the men that find refuge in this aura, because they will have the heavenly kingdom. Christ. Among the Persians, Christ is Ormuzd, Ahura Mazda, the antithesis of Ahriman, Satan. In the sacred land of the Vedas, Christ is Vishnu, the second Logos, the sublime emanation of Brahma, the first Logos. The Hindustanic Jesus is the avatar Krishna. The gospel of this master is similar to that of the divine rabbi from Galilee. Amongst the ancient Chinese, Fu Hai is the cosmic Christ, who wrote the famous I Ching, the Book of Laws, and who appointed dragons as ministers for the benefit of humanity. In the sunny country of Kem, in the land of the pharaohs, Christ is in fact Osiris, and whoever incarnated him became, therefore, Osirified. Quetzalcoatl, the white god, is the Mexican Christ, and lives now in distant Tule. Immaculate Conceptions. It is urgent to understand the actual nature of the Immaculate Conceptions. These abound in all the ancient cults. Fu Hai, Quetzalcoatl, Buddha, and many others are the results of Immaculate Conceptions. The sacred fire fecundates the waters of life so that the Master is born within us. Every angel is certainly the son of the Divine Mother Kundalini. She is actually a virgin before, during, and after childbirth. We can assert the following in a solemn manner. The husband of Devi Kundalini, our own cosmic mother, is the third Logos, the Holy Ghost, Shiva, the firstborn of creation, our intimate monad, individual, or better said, superindividual monad. Chapter 3. Spiritualism. I was still a boy of 12 springs when I, with someone else who was eagerly investigating the mysteries of the worlds beyond, decided to inquire and investigate the disturbing subject of spiritualism. With the tenacity of a monk working in his cell, I studied a large number of metaphysical works by authors such as Luis Ziaribe, Camille Flammarion, Kardec, Leon Denis, Cesare Lombroso, etc. The first work of a series by Kardec appeared to be very interesting, but I had to read it 3 times so that I could understand it in its entirety. I became a library mouse. I must confess that I developed a passion for the Book of the Spirits. Afterwards I continued reading many other volumes full of interesting material. With my mind closed firmly against anything other than this study, I used to shut myself up in my home or in the public library with an evident desire to search for the secret path. Without pretending to be a renowned scholar in these matters, I intend now to show the results of my research concerning spiritualism. Mediums. Passive, receptive subjects that transfer their own matter, their own bodies, to the metaphysical ghosts from beyond the grave. It is unquestionable that the karma associated with mediums is epilepsy. Clearly, people who suffer from epilepsy were mediums in their previous lives. Experiments. 1. A certain lady, whose name I will not mention, constantly saw the ghost of a dead woman. This spirit whispered many things to her. This lady fell into a trance during a solemn spiritualist séance. The ghost directed the lady to dig in a definite place in the house, because there it said to her she would find a large treasure. The directions given by the ghost were followed, but unfortunately no treasure was found. It is unquestionable that this fortune was only a mental projection of the subjective psyche of those present. It is obvious that these people were at heart very greedy. 2. Far away in time and distance, very distant from my beloved Mexican country, I had to go into the state of Zulia, in Venezuela, South America. I was a guest of my host at his country home, and I must assert that during that time I was eyewitness to an unusual metaphysical occurrence. It is convenient to tell my readers now that my host was, without any doubt, a very humble person of the colored race. It is unquestionable that this good man, though very generous with the needy, spent much on great banquets. It was impossible for this good man to live in a hotel amid educated people, or to feel resentful towards somebody with any motive whatsoever. He certainly preferred to devote himself to his task, the hard misfortunes of daily work. This gentleman appeared to have the gift of ubiquity, since he was seen all over the place, here, there, everywhere. One of the many evenings I spent with him, he invited me with much secrecy to a spiritualist séance. I did not want to refuse such a kind invitation. We were seated around a 3-legged table, 3 persons together under the roof of the old country house. My host, filled with immense veneration, opened a small box that he always took with him on his travels and from it extracted a native skull. Later on, he recited some beautiful prayers and called out loudly for the ghost of this mysterious skull. It was midnight, the sky was overcast with black, sinister clouds, which were outlined against the tropical horizon. It was raining, and the region was badly shaken by thunder and lightning. Strange knocks were felt from the inside of the box, and then, defying the law of gravity, mocking the old texts of physics, the table raised up from the floor. Then most sensational thing happened. The ghost that had been called materialized in the room and passed next to me. At the end, the table leaned towards me, and the skull, that was on the table, came to rest in my arms. "Enough," cried out my host. "The storm is very intense, and under these conditions such invocations are very dangerous." At that precise moment, a terrifying burst of lightning made the face of the conjurer turn pale. 3. Wandering about one of those old alleys one day in the Ciudad de Mexico DF, moved by a strange curiosity, I managed, with some other people, to enter an old house where a spiritualist center operated. There was an exquisite drawing room of great refinement and with many delicate, emotional, and important people. In a respectful manner, I sat down in front of the stage. I was determined not to take any risks. My purpose in going into this place was certainly not to get imbued with the spiritualist doctrines, or even less to have commerce with evil, pretending friendliness and false piety. I only wanted to take some notes of all the details, trying to show flexible understanding and common sense. It is not part of the spiritualist mentality to practice public speaking. The sacred brotherhood of the mystery waited with longing for mystical voices and words from beyond the grave. A gentleman of some age fell into a trance independently of the others and started to convulse as if he were having an epileptic fit. He then mounted the stage, occupied the platform, and started to speak. "Here, among you, Jesus of Nazareth, the Christ, the poor possessed soul," announced in a loud voice. During those terrible instants, the stage decorated with flowers and candles started to shake horribly, and all those devoted people fell prostrate to the ground. Without wishing to disturb anybody in the performance of his or her duties, I started calmly to study the medium by means of my sixth sense. Full of anguish, I was able to verify with certainty the crude reality of that unusual metaphysical event. Obviously, it was a sinister impostor of the left-hand path who exploited the credulity of these people by pretending to be Jesus Christ. I saw with my clairvoyant powers a black sorcerer dressed in a tunic as red as blood. The grim ghost inhabiting the physical body of the medium tried to speak in a Christian tone of voice when giving advice to the people in the audience so that these fanatics did not find him out. At the end of this horrible séance, I left the place with a strong wish to never go back. For it is romantic to live with your family and work in peace and quiet as if by magic on your own land. Sometimes, however, it is impossible to avoid taking risks if it is with the objective of obtaining all the possible good for others. Bounded by many intellectual walls, my desire was to acquire wisdom, and for this purpose I traveled when very young to many places of the world. Far away in time and distance, in the distant remoteness of a South American region known by the typical name of Quindio, I, being very flexible with understanding, had the opportunity to meet a spiritualist medium working as a blacksmith. Without getting involved in discussions of any kind, the workman worked placidly in his red forge. He was a strange spiritualist, a mystical lord with a bronzed figure, an athletic monk. Good heavens! I saw him in a sinister mediumistic trance, possessed by Beelzebub, prince of all demons. I still remember those dark words with which the power of darkness closed the session. Bel tengo mento la petrai que el luendub sidra, veo genizer lude. Then he signed, Beelzebub. Blacksmith, paradoxical hermit. The day following the spiritualist meeting of the left-hand path, I found him very contrite, and he swore in the name of the living God that he would never again lend his body to the hideous being of darkness. I used to see him sometimes at his forge consulting in a very sincere manner the spiritualist prayer book of Kardec. Later on, full of mystical enthusiasm, he invited me to many exhaustive séances, in which, with infinite longing, he called forth Juan Hurtado the Senior. Without exaggerating, and for the good of my beloved readers, I must assert that this ghost, speaking through the medium, boasted of being able to manifest himself through 150 mediums at the same time. It is certainly normal to conclude with a speech to someone in rhyming words. However, at the time it appeared to me astounding to be able to pluralize himself into 150 simultaneous, different discourses. It is unquestionable that at that time of my life I still had not analyzed the subject of the plurality of the ego, of the myself. Ego. Without wishing to overextend myself by deviating from my main subject in any way, I wish to emphasize very sincerely those matters, which I have experienced in a direct way. The ego mentioned above totally lacks any qualities, which are divine, self-exalting, and dignified. Let us be allowed to disagree with those who presuppose the existence of two egos, one of a superior type, one of an inferior class. We can certainly certify, without any inconsistency, the tremendous fact that for each person there is only one ego, pluralized and terribly perverse. This deep conviction is based on the experience lived by the author of this esoteric treatise. In no way we need to publish immature ideas. We would never make the awful mistake of asserting absurd utopian propositions. Our assertion has a copious documentation in every sacred text of ancient times. As a living example of our assertion, we can remember the bloody battles of Arjuna against his beloved relatives, the egos, in the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of the Lord. It should be clear that these subjective, psychic aggregates evidently personify the entire set of psychological defects which all of us carry inside. Rigorous experimental psychology indicates that the consciousness is bottled up inside these subjective egos. What continues beyond the grave, therefore, is the ego, a pile of ego's devils, the psychical aggregates. The identification of such psychical aggregates in spiritualist centers is obvious and evident. It is notoriously evident that these ego's devils, because of their multiplicity, can enter into many mediumistic bodies, as in the case of Juan Hurtado, the senior, in order to achieve manifestation. From a state of ecstasy, any master of the samadhi would be able to give clear evidence of the following. Those who manifest themselves through spiritualist mediums are certainly not the souls nor the spirits of the dead, but their ego's devils, the psychical aggregates which continue beyond the grave. We have been told with much emphasis that during the post-mortem state, mediums continue being possessed by the devil, or by some devils. It is unquestionable that after some time they end up divorcing themselves from their own divine being. Then they join the submerged involution of the infernal worlds. Chapter 4. Theosophy. Without being involved in any way in delicate and many-sided matters of a philosophical and metaphysical type, I must confess frankly and with utmost sincerity that I had not yet arrived at the 16 springs of my present existence, when I was involved in many important and interesting matters. With infinite eagerness, I decided to analyze in detail the problems of the spirit under the light of modern science. I was very interested then in the scientific experiments of the English physicist William Crookes, eminent discoverer of the radiant state of matter and of thallium, illustrious member of the Royal Society of Great Britain. In my opinion, the materialization of the ghost of Katie King actually in the laboratory were sensational. This subject was studied by Crookes in his measurement of psychic forces. Many sacred subjects from antiquity appeared to me as excellent, exceptional, and marvelous, such as the snake of paradise, the ass of Balaam, the words of the Sphinx, the mysterious dawn voices of the statues of Memnon, the terrible mean tessel fairs of the feast of Balthasar, the seraphim of the Ran, the father of Abraham, the oracles of Delphi, the betelos or talking stones of destiny, the oscillatory, magic menhirs of the Druids, the enigmatic voices of all the necromantic bloody sacrifices. The authentic origin of the whole of classic tragedy, whose indiscreet revelations in Prometheus, the Coephoro, and the Eumenides cost his life to the initiate Aeschylus, the words of Tiresias, the soothsayer evoked by Ulysses in the Odyssey, at the edge of the hole filled with the blood of the propitiatory black lamb, the secret voices that Alaric heard ordering him to destroy sinful Rome, and those that the Maid of Orleans heard so that she would destroy the English, etc. etc. Having been taught good manners by my parents, and without trying great oratory feats when engaging in public speaking, I was giving lectures to the Theosophical Society at the age of 17 years. I received the Theosophist diploma from Jinur Jadesa, illustrious president of that august society, whom at that time I knew personally. Being quite sure of my temperament, I then became well informed concerning the strange, mysterious knocks in Rochester, the classical psychical phenomena at the farm belonging to the Eddy family, where the Theosophical Society was born. I had accumulated much data related to the evocative tripods of the Pittanises of ancient times. I knew about haunted houses and of post-mortem apparitions and was well acquainted with all telepathic phenomena. Unquestionably, having so much metaphysical data in my poor, overstretched mind, I had become a very demanding scholar. However, I sincerely wished to give shape to my heart by means of the good theosophical criteria, and I had a real feast with the works I found in the rich library. With mystical surprise, I found an inexhaustible spring of divine knowledge in the pages of the secret doctrine, the extraordinary work of the venerable great master Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, the sublime martyr of the 19th century. Let us consider now the following interesting notes. 1885, in his diary, Colonel Alcott notes on the 9th of January. HPB has received from Master M the plan for her secret doctrine. It is excellent. Oakley and I tried to draw up such a plan last night, but this one is much better. The machinations by the couple Coulomb hastened the departure of HPB from Udyar, and she arrived in Europe in March, carrying the precious manuscript. When I was getting ready to board the ship, Subarro advised me to write the secret doctrine, and that every week he should receive what I had written. I promised this, and I will indeed do it, since he will add notes and commentaries, and then the Theosophical Society will publish it during that year. The Master K.H. wrote, "When the secret doctrine is ready, it will be a joint production by M. Upasika and I. It is evident that these notes draw us to meditation." However, it is clear that the Venerable Master interpreted the teachings, adapting them for our times. Once finished with the theoretical studies of a theosophical type, I intensively practiced Riya Yoga, Bhakti, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, etc., etc., etc. I obtained multiple psychical benefits from the practical yoga commended by this venerable institution. Since the worthiest master HPB always considered the Hatha Yoga as something inferior, I wish to assert that I was never interested in this branch of the Hindustani Yoga. Much later, I was invited to a great assembly of the Venerable Great White Lodge, where Hatha Yoga was proclaimed as black magic. Chapter 5. The Rosicrucian Fraternity. I was already in the 18th spring of my adolescence, in my present reincarnation, when I had the great honor of becoming a member of the ancient Rosicrucian school. This worthy institution was fortunately founded by the great Dr. Arnaldo Krumheller, Dr. Colonel of the glorious Mexican Army, illustrious veteran of the Mexican Revolution, distinguished professor at the Medical University in Berlin, Germany, notable scientist, extraordinary polyglot. I turned up at the Alla Lucas, then presided over by an illustrious gentleman of great intelligence. I will confess that, being a headstrong lad, I started arguing and showing some arrogance, but I finished studying. What seemed best for me was to go and sit near the wall, at the corner of the classroom, enraptured in ecstasy. Needless to say that, even when I was steeped into many intricate theories of vast content, I yearned with infinite longing to find my old way, the path of the razor's edge. Carefully excluding any feelings of pseudo-piety and any insubstantial wordiness, I definitely decided to combine theory and practice. Without prostituting my intelligence for gold, I truly preferred to prostrate myself, full of humility, in the presence of the demiurge creator of the universe. I found a rich and inexhaustible source of exquisite splendors in the magnificent works of Krumheller, Hartmann, Eliphas Levi, Steiner, Max Heindel, etc., etc., etc. Without boasting, I declare seriously, sincerely and emphatically that during that period of my life I studied in an orderly fashion the whole of the Rosicrucian library. With infinite yearning, I searched along the road for a traveler possessing a precious balsam to heal my aching heart. I suffered dreadfully and cried out in my loneliness, invoking the holy masters of the Great White Lodge. The great Kabir Jesus said, "Knock and it shall be opened unto you, ask and it shall be given you, search and you shall find." In the name of that which is real, I declare the following, according to the teachings of the Christian gospel. I asked, and it was given to me, I searched and did find, I knocked, and it was opened. When dealing with such long and complex studies as those of the Rosicrucians, it is unquestionable that there is no way in which all the topics could be contained in the narrow frame of the present chapter. Therefore, I will only synthesize and draw some conclusions. Frontal chakra. It is developed by the intonation of the vowel E. Faculty, clairvoyance. Laryngeal chakra. It is developed by singing the vowel E. Faculty, magic hearing. Cardiac chakra. It is developed by vocalizing the letter O. Faculties, intuition, inspiration, astral projection, etc., etc. Umbilical chakra. It is developed by singing the vowel U. Faculties, telepathy. Pulmonary chakra. These are developed by singing the letter A, faculty, remembrance of past existences. E.E.O.U.A is the order of the vowels. All mantras are formed with these letters. Dr. Krumheller used to say that an hour of daily vocalization was better than reading 1,000,000 books on pseudo-esotericism and pseudo-occultism. I used to inhale with supreme ardor the Christic prana, the vital breath of the mountains, and then exhaled slowly, making the corresponding vowel resonate. For the sake of clarity, I shall indicate that each vowel was preceded by an inhalation, and that it resonated only at the exhalation. It is obvious that I inhaled by the nostrils and exhaled by the mouth. Concrete results. All my astral chakras or magnetic centers intensified their vibratory activity, rotating positively from left to right like the hands of a clock observed from the front, and not from its side. Retrospective exercise. Using a fair amount of didactics, the professor taught us a certain marvelous retrospective exercise. He advised us never to move in bed at the exact instant of awakening, explaining to us that with such a movement the astral body is agitated, and the recollections are lost. It is unquestionable that during the hours of sleep the human soul travels outside the physical body. It is important not to forget our intimate experiences when returning to the body. He suggested to us to practice a retrospective exercise at that precise moment with the aim of remembering facts, occurrences, and places visited during dreams. Results. I solemnly declare that such a psychical exercise had astonishing results, because my recollections became more vivid, intense, and deep. Solar plexus. According to the instructions of the professor, I used to sit every day, preferably at dawn, on a comfortable armchair with the face towards the east. I imagined then in an extraordinary manner a gigantic golden cross, with the king star as its basic center, which cast divine rays from the east of the world that penetrated into my solar plexus after traveling the infinite space. I was delighted when I combined this exercise with the mantric intonation of the vowel U, prolonging the sound as it should be done. Results. A result was the awakening of my telepathic eye, located as mentioned above in the region of the navel, and I became exquisitely hypersensitive. Since this magnetic chakra has amazing capabilities such as the attraction and accumulation of the radiant energy of the solar globe, it is obvious that for this reason my lotus flowers or astral wheels could receive higher electromagnetic charges that intensified further the vibrating radioactivity. It is appropriate to remind the reader at this moment that the solar plexus supplies all chakras of the human organism with solar radiations. I can assert emphatically and solemnly that each of my astral chakras developed in an extraordinary manner, thus intensifying my clairvoyant and clairaudient perceptions, etc., etc., etc. Departure. Just before I left this worthy institution, the professor said, "None of those present here should dare to characterize himself as a Rosicrucian, because all of us are nothing but simple, ordinary candidates to become Rosicrucians." And then he added with great solemnity, "A Buddha, a Jesus, a Moria, a KH, etc., 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 is a Rosicrucian." Chapter 6. The Corsair. For some people of a very superficial nature, the theory of reincarnation is a reason for laughter. For others, who are very religious, it may be a taboo or a sin. For the pseudo-occultists, it is a very firm belief, and for the intellectual rascals, a crazy utopia. It is, however, a fact for those of us who remember our previous existences. In the name of truth, I must solemnly swear that I was born remembering all my past reincarnations. To swear this is no crime. I am a man with an awakened consciousness. Obviously, we must make a frank differentiation between reincarnation and return, two very different laws. This is not, however, the objective of the present chapter. After this preamble, let us go directly to the facts and come to the point. In days gone by, when the seas of the world were infested with pirate ships, I had a very bitter experience. At that time, the bodhisattva of the angel Diabolo Cardabu was reincarnated. It should be asserted, with some emphasis, that being had a feminine body of magnificent beauty. It is a fact that I was her father. Unfortunately, at an ill-fated time, the cruel pirates that respected neither lives nor reputations, after laying waste the European town where we, together with many citizens, lived in peace, kidnapped the beautiful women of the town, among which was my daughter, an innocent maid of days gone by. In spite of the terror of the inhabitants, I bravely managed, putting my own life in danger, to confront the treacherous captain of the pirate ship. Take my daughter away from that hell where you have put her, and I promise you that I will take your soul from the hell in which it is now. Such were my painful exclamations. The fearful corsair, looking at me fiercely, took pity on my insignificant person, and with an imperative voice ordered me to wait for a moment. With infinite anxiety, I watched the buccaneer return to his black vessel. I understand that he shrewdly managed to deceive his ruthless sea dogs. Anyhow, some moments later he gave me my daughter back. Oh God and Hail Mary! But who could have thought that after several centuries I would find again the ego of this fearful pirate reincorporated in a new human organism? Thus is the law of eternal return of all beings and things, and everything is repeated according to another law, that of recurrence. One night of great spiritual restlessness, I joyfully found him among a select group of aspirants to become Rosicrucians. That old corsair spoke English and told me of his many travels. He had been a seaman working for a North American shipping company. This friendship became, however, a will-o'-the-wisp, because soon I could verify that this man, in spite of his mystical yearnings, continued being, in his most intimate depths, an ancient corsair, the only difference being that he was now dressed in a modern fashion. This gentleman got very excited telling me about his astral experiences. It was a fact that he could project at will. One day we arranged a metaphysical transcendental session at the SSS of Berlin, Germany. This was a relatively new experience, because until then it had not yet occurred to me to carry out the experiment consisting of the voluntary projection of the eidolon. However, I knew I could do it, and therefore I dared to accept the appointment. With total clarity, I remember those solemn moments in which I became a spy of my own dream. In a mystical ambush, I waited for that instant of transition which exists between vigil and dream. I wanted to seize this moment of wonders to escape from my physical body. The state of weariness and the first dreamlike images were sufficient to warn me in an integral manner that the sought-for moment had arrived. In a delicate way I rose from my bed, and walking very quietly I left my home, feeling full of a spiritual, exquisite, delicious voluptuousness. It is unquestionable that when I rose from my bed instants after starting to doze, the astral separation took place, the natural separation of the eidolon. Exhibiting that singular shine of the astral body, I left these surroundings, wanting to go to the temple in Berlin. Delightfully, I was able to travel over the stormy waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Floating serenely in the radiant astral atmosphere of this world, I arrived at the lands of ancient Europe and immediately went to the capital of France. I walked silent as a ghost around those old streets that had served as a stage for the French Revolution. Suddenly something unusual happened. A telepathic wave arrived at my solar plexus, and I felt the categorical imperative to go into a beautiful home. There is no way in which I could regret crossing the opulent threshold of that noble mansion, since there I had the immense happiness of finding a friend of my past reincarnations. This friend floated happily, submerged in the fluid astral environment, outside the dense body that lay asleep in the perfumed mahogany bed. Also, in that nuptial bed slept the delicious physical body of his love. Her sidereal soul, outside its mortal receptacle, shared the marvelous joy of her husband, and floated. And I saw two tender infants of marvelous beauty happily playing among the magical charms of that dwelling. I greeted my old friend, and also his ineffable Eve, but the children got scared at my unusual presence. It appeared to me that it would be better to go out, to the streets of Paris, and my friend did not disagree with this idea. Talking, we moved away from the house full of delights. We walked slowly, along those streets and avenues that point away from the center towards the periphery. In the outskirts of this great metropolis, I proposed point blank, as they say that together we visited the esoteric temple of Berlin, Germany. This initiate declined the invitation in an amiable manner, arguing that he had a wife and children and thus wanted to concentrate his attention on the economic problems of life. With great regret, I left this awakened man, lamenting the fact that he was postponing his esoteric work. Suspending myself from the astral light of the wonders and marvels, I passed above some very old walls from antiquity. Happy I traveled along the tortuous road that, serpentine, twisted and turned here and there. Inebriated with ecstasy, I arrived at the temple of the transparent walls. The entrance to this holy place was certainly very peculiar. I saw a kind of Sunday park, full of beautiful plants and exquisite flowers that exhaled a breath of death. The temple of splendors shone, solemn, at the end of the enchanting garden. The lattice iron doors that gave access to the beautiful park of the sanctuary sometimes opened so that somebody could enter, sometimes they closed. The whole of that delicate and wonderful ensemble stood out, illuminated by the immaculate light of the universal spirit of life. In front of the Sancta Sanctorum I found many noble applicants of various nationalities, countries, and tongues. Mystical souls that at that time when the physical body sleeps, moved by the strength of their yearning, had escaped from the dense mortal shape to come to the sancta. These devoted people talked about ineffable themes. They reflected on the law of karma, argued about extraordinary cosmic affairs. The perfume of friendship and the fragrance of sincerity arose from them. In a state of goodwill, I moved from here to there everywhere looking for the audacious buccaneer that had dared to make this tremendous rendezvous. I interrupted many groups asking for this gentleman, but nobody could give me an answer. I understood then that this old pirate had not kept his promise. I knew not why, and I felt let down. Silently, I decided to get closer to the glorious door of the Temple of Knowledge. I wished to enter the holy place, but the guardian closed the door, telling me, "It is not time yet, go away." Serenely, and understanding everything, I sat down joyfully on the symbolic stone, very close to the portal of mystery. At that moment of plenitude, I self-observed wholly. It is a fact that my psyche is not subjective. I was born with an awakened consciousness and have access to objective knowledge. How beautiful the astral body appeared to me. The splendid result of very ancient transmutations of the libido. I remembered my physical body that was now asleep in the remoteness of the Western world, in a small town in America. While self-observing, I committed the error of confronting the astral and physical vehicles. Because of such comparisons, I lost the ecstasy and returned immediately to the interior of my dense material sheath. A few moments later, I got up from the bed. I had achieved a marvelous astral split. When I asked the old pirate in a severe manner the reason why he had been unable to carry out his promise, he could not give a satisfactory answer. 35 years had passed since that time in which that old sea dog and I had agreed to that mysterious rendezvous. Far away in time and distance, that strange character was only a memory lying among the dusty pages of my old chronicles. However, I confess that after so many years I was amazed by something quite unusual. One spring night, being absent from my dense mortal form, I saw the Lord Shiva, the Holy Ghost, my sacred super-individual monad, with the ineffable appearance of the Ancient of the Days. The Lord was admonishing the old corsair of the seas with great severity. It is unquestionable that his physical body was asleep in his bed at that time of the night. Eagerly, I wanted to intervene as third party in the discord. The old man of the centuries ordered me in a strong manner to be quiet. Years ago, the pirate had given me back my daughter, had taken her away from the hell in which he himself had put her. Now my real being, Samael, struggled to free and emancipate him, to take him away from the infernal worlds. Chapter 7. Meditation. Bounded by intellectual walls, fed up with so many complicated and difficult theories, I made up my mind to travel towards the tropical coast of the Caribbean Sea. Over there, far away, seated under the sparse shadow of a lonely tree like a hermit of times past, I decided to bury all this difficult retinue of useless rationalism. With a blank mind, starting from radical zero, sunk in deep meditation, I searched inside myself for the secret master. Without hesitation, I shall confess with sincerity that I took very seriously that sentence from the Gospel of Ancient Wisdom that says, to the letter, before the false dawn appeared over the earth, those that survived the hurricane and the storm praised the intimate, and the heralds of the dawn arose in front of them. Obviously, I was searching for the intimate. I adored it in the secret of the meditation, worshipping him. I knew that I would find it inside myself, in the unknown depths of my soul. And I did not have to wait long for the results. Later on, I had to leave that sandy beach to take refuge in other countries, other places. However, no matter where I was, I continued my practices of meditation. Lying in bed or on the hard floor, I arranged myself in the shape of a burning star, legs and arms open at right and left with the body totally relaxed. I closed my eyes so that nothing in the world could distract me. Then I became intoxicated with the wine of meditation in the glass of perfect concentration. Unquestionably, as I intensified my practices, I felt that I had really got nearer to the intimate. The vanities of the world did not interest me, knowing full well that everything in this valley of tears is transitory. The intimate and its secret, instantaneous answers were the only things that really concerned me. There are extraordinary cosmic festivals that can never be forgotten. This is well known by the divines and the humans. At this moment, when I am writing these lines, the pleasant dawn of a happy day comes to my memory. From the interior garden of my home, outside the planetary body, kneeling humbly down, crying out with a great voice, I called the intimate. The blessed one crossed over the threshold of my mansion. I saw him come to me in triumphal progress. Dressed in precious zephyr and a white ineffable tunic, the adorable came to me. I contemplated him happily. The crown of the Hierophants glittered splendidly in his heavenly head. His body was made out of happiness. Those valuable jewels, mentioned in the Apocalypse of St. John, shone beautifully. In his right hand, the Lord gripped strongly the wand of Mercury, the scepter of the kings, the baton of the patriarchs. The Lord of Perfections took me then to the planet Venus, very far from the bitterness of this world. In this way, I approached the intimate by the secret path of internal deep meditation. Now I speak because Chapter 8. The States of Jinn. It is a fact that, in spite of spending much of my life in many occupations, I had to investigate thoroughly the states of Jinn. The reader should judge whether it is right that the findings given in this chapter should cause us to be amazed and happy. After all, we have been able to experience directly the actual existence of some of the lands and people of Jinn. It will cause amazement that in the first third of the 18th century, when the superstitious Felipes no longer reigned, the same Don Juan de Moor y Aguirre, former governor of San Marcos de Aracoa in Peru, believed blindly in the existence of a multitude of mysterious islands present in all the seas of the world. This was due to the fact that since La Gomera and La Palma used to send to the general and the royal audience rather fantastic reports concerning the repeated apparitions of such islands, they gave rise in the mood of the people, according to Vieira, to new attacks of wonderment, driving them to attempt for the fourth time the discovery of the island Nantrabada. It is true that this, also known as Encubierta, the hidden island, has not been seen again by mortals since the 18th century, because the aggressive skepticism that prevails in the world since the encyclopedia deserves nothing but that the veil of Maya should become denser and thicker, so that such ethereal mysteries, belonging to the fourth dimension, remain hidden. The island Nantrabada, or Encubierta, also and more generally known as San Borondon, says Benitez in his History of the Canary Islands, is one of those enchanted places that have preoccupied modern people in the same way as the Golden Fleece fascinated the ancients. And indeed they had powerful reasons for this, since from the islands of La Palma, Gomera and Hierro one could occasionally see at the WSW of the first and the WNW of the last one, running in the direction north to south, a kind of mountainous land which, according to the calculations usually accepted, was about 40 leagues from La Palma, and was of a size we do not know how it was measured, of some 87 leagues in length by 28 of width, and that, since sometimes it was possible to see it. From the southeast of Tenerife, could have been about 28 degrees and some minutes of latitude north. On April 3, 1570, Dr. Hernan Perez de Grado, first regent of the Audience of the Canary Islands, issued a stipulation directed to the islands of Palma, Gomera and Hierro, so that they do precise research, with all the people that had observed the apparition of such a land, or had, by other means, proof of its existence. In this way, the Portuguese pilot Pedro Vello, from Setúbal, gave evidence that, because of a storm, he disembarked in the island Nontrabada with 2 sailors from his crew, and there he saw some incredible wonders, extraordinary phenomena, footprints of giants, etc. Then, at dawn, the sky became cloudy, a horrifying hurricane started to blow, and him, afraid of losing his ship, went quickly back on board. They lost sight of the land at the moment of setting sail, and soon after the hurricane stopped they tried to return to it, but it was impossible to find, so that they felt very distressed, especially since 2 sailors from the crew had stayed behind, abandoned in the thick of the forest. This true Jin history that I have just presented to the readers has been extracted verbatim from ancient chronicles. Some old traditions, doubtless very respectable, say that during the golden age of Latium and the Liguria, the divine King Janus or Saturn, Iao, Bacchus, Jehovah, reigned over those holy people, Aryan tribes all, though from very different epochs and origins. Then, as in the corresponding era of the Hebrew people, it could be said that jinn and men lived together happily. The jnana, jnana or gnosis, is nothing but the science of Janus, that is, the science of initiate knowledge, the science of Enochian, also known as the seer, and the variants of his name are such that there is one in each tongue, such as Jan, Chan or Can, Dan, Zan, Jan, Jane, Jen, Yoan, Quan Swan, Thenos, Thoan, Chohun, all equivalent to the most sublime conception of a planetary spirit, the regent of Saturn, a Nizada, a Kabir in the most complete sense of the word. For me, Jinn science is not an opinion, but an established truth, and if you want me to show it to you by means of a lived experience, listen patiently to the following story. In my present reincarnation, I had seen the autumn leaves fall 30 times when I had to work consciously and positively with the doctrine of the jinns or Janus. One night full of marvels, Lytolantes, my priestess wife, made me a sublime invitation. I was resting on my back on the wedding bed, in a relaxed state. I must solemnly assert, for the good of the great cause, that at that time I was in a condition of alert novelty, alert perception. I slept, observant and vigilant, as a watchman in times of war. I obviously yearned with infinite craving for something extraordinary. After the well-known, customary invocations, I felt as if another human being was settling on my relaxed body, on the blankets and bedclothes that were protecting me deliciously from the cold of the night. Unquestionably, it was Lytolantes. I recognized her voice when in a vehement way she called me by my Christian name. Ostensibly that lady adept, through some extra help from Jinn people, had managed to put her physical body inside the 4th dimension. "Let's go," she said. "Let's go. Let's go." I had waited for this moment for a long time with infinite yearning, so I urgently got up from our bed. It is obvious and evident that when I got up, because of the help I had, I went over the barrier of the speed of light, remaining then standing next to the bed as a penitent and anchorite, with the physical body well submerged inside the 4th dimension. Any sincere Gnostic could certainly do the same if at the moment of starting to doze he would intensively concentrate on his special and individual divine Mother Nature. A very special magic formula is as follows. I believe in God. I believe in my Mother Nature. And I believe in white magic. My Mother, carry me with my body. Amen. This prayer should be prayed thousands of times at the moment of dozing off. It is convenient, however, not to forget the vulgar saying, "Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition." When you are feeling slightly drowsy, get up from the bed, imploring, and then jump up with the intention of floating into the surrounding space. Have faith as a grain of mustard and you will move mountains. If you do not manage to float, go back to your bed and repeat the experiment. Many succeed immediately, but others take months and even whole years to managed to enter into the Jinn paradise. After this short but important indicative digression, we shall continue with our story. I left my bedroom with a firm and determined step, went across a small courtyard and then onto the street. Making way for me with much respect, a certain group of very elderly ladies bowed reverently at my insignificant, worthless person. I thanked them for the special deference. I left the city followed very closely by that group of Jinn people and went towards the neighboring mountains. I felt as if I had been plunged into a remote, ancient, sublunary past, and understood that I had penetrated the inferior cosmos. I was subject to tests of courage, being forced to go over deep precipices, floating in the surrounding space of the fourth vertical, accompanied by Lytolantes and the whole retinue of Jinn people. I went over the stormy sea and arrived at a secret place of old Europe. Courageously, I went into a certain castle, where I contemplated with astonishment a strange symbol under which there was a cross. The return to my house was relatively easy, because it is a law in the fourth dimension that everything returns to its original point of departure. Lytolantes and I talked very joyfully about all this. We had obviously achieved a magnificent triumph. Days later we continued with those experiments, and learned how to put the physical body in the superior cosmos. Today, by direct experience, we know that with the help of the Divine Mother Kundalini we can put the physical body in a Jinn state, to travel around the superior cosmos. Chapter 9. The Dionysian Wave. Unquestionably Mammon and Dionysus will never be able to be reconciled, being incompatible both in their form and their content. In an irrefutable axiomatic manner we can and must define Mammon by means of two terms. A. Intellectualism. B. Money, gold, riches. Correctly, and in a blunt and definitive manner, we must define a Dionysus as follows. A. Voluntary transmutation of the sexual libido. B. Mystical transcendental ecstasy. It is appropriate to cite now among the grandeurs of this poor pygmy of a humanity, that date and hour February 4th, 1962, between 2 and 3 p.m., in which all the planets of our solar system got together in a supreme cosmic council, precisely in the brilliant constellation of Aquarius, to initiate the new era surrounded by the august thundering of thought. From that memorable date and under the regency of Uranus, the very venerable and most worthy lord of Aquarius, the Dionysian wave vibrates intensely in the whole of nature. The following transcendental news should be emphasized, that this planet has been, is and always will be the brilliant heavenly body that rules and governs intelligently the sexual endocrine glands. Now you can understand by yourselves the intrinsic cause that at this moment gives rise to the intensive Dionysian vibration. The concrete fact that the earth dwellers, in their overwhelming majority, did not rise up to the occasion, and were incapable of polarizing that wave positively is evident and obvious. To define the two aspects positive-negative of this cosmic vibration is urgent, pressing and indispensable. Positive Dionysian pole. Subliminal sexual pleasure, voluntary transmutation of the entity of the semen, awakened consciousness, objective knowledge, superlative intuition, transcendental music by the great classical masters, etc. Negative Dionysian pole, sexual degeneration, all kinds of infrasexualism. Homosexuality, lesbianism, demoniac pleasures in the infernal worlds by means of drugs, mushrooms, alcohol, infernal music like that of the new wave, etc., etc., etc. It is urgent to understand deeply the intimate processes of the two poles of the Dionysian wave. As a living example of such a diametrically opposed pair of poles corresponding to the above-mentioned undulation, it is appropriate here to cite as illustration two contemporary revolutionary movements. In a delicate way I want to refer clearly and without hesitation to the universal international Christian Gnostic movement and also to the obverse of the Dionysian metal, known by the sadly famous name of the hippie movement. Unquestionably, these two psychological antipodes are per se unmistakable living demonstration of the pair of opposite poles of the tremendous Dionysian vibration. Having arrived judiciously at this part of the present chapter, the need for a didactic confrontation becomes inevitable. When one is trying to experience what is the truth, the reality, then Dionysian. Inebriation, ecstasy, samadhi are obviously indispensable. Such an exaltation is 100% possible by means of the technique of meditation. Psychedelia is different. This term should be translated as follows: psyche equals soul. Delia equals drug. Being more specific, we shall say, psychedelia is the antithesis of meditation. The drug hell is in the interior of the planetary organism in which we live, under the same skin of the Earth's crust. The hallucinatory mushrooms, pills, LSD, marijuana, etc., 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 evidently intensify the vibratory capabilities of the subjective powers, but it is clear that they would never be able to awaken the consciousness. Drugs fundamentally alter the sexual genes. This has been scientifically demonstrated. As a consequence of such negative genetic mutations, the evident result is the birth of monstrous children. Meditation and psychedelia are incompatible, opposite, antagonistic. They will never be able to blend with each other. Unquestionably, these two factors of the Dionysian inebriation indicate and point to a psychological rebellion. Gnostics and hippies got fed up with the vain intellectualism of mammon, got fed up with so many theories, arrived at the conclusion that the mind is worthless as an instrument for research. Zen? Jnana Yoga? This is superlative. There are inside us in latent state faculties of cognition infinitely superior to the mind. Through them we can experiment in direct form with what is real, that which does not belong to time. The hippie movement preferred the drug hell. It undoubtedly defined itself perversely. We Gnostics, totally disillusioned by Mammon's futile intellectualism, drink the wine of meditation in the glass of perfect concentration. Psychological changes, radical and deep, become urgent when the villains of the mind disillusion us. It is necessary to go back to the starting point. Only in this way is a radical transformation possible. Sexology? Oh God and Hail Mary. Puritans are horrified by this subject. It is written in letters of fire in the scriptures that sex is a stumbling block and a rock of scandal. The evidence stands out that we are not the children of any theory, school, or section. At the bare source of our existence, we just find a man, a woman, and a coitus. We are born naked, somebody cut our umbilical cord, we cry and then look for the maternal breast. Clothes? Schools? Theories? Erudition? Money? Etc., etc., etc. All this came afterwards, as an extra. Beliefs of all types exist everywhere. However, the only force that can transform us in an integral and unitotal manner is that one that has brought us into existence. I wish to refer to the creative energy of the first instant, sexual potency. By logical consequence, the amorous delight, the erotic enjoyment, is the greatest happiness. To know how to copulate wisely is indispensable when one yearns sincerely for a definitive psychological change. The hippies had a presentiment of all this when they rebelled against Mammon. However, they took the wrong road, and did not know how to synchronize with the positive pole of Dionysus. We Gnostics are different. We know how to enjoy, we like to transmute and sublimate the libido. This is not a crime. The hippie movement marches resolutely by the involutive descending road of infrasexuality. The universal international Gnostic Christian movement moves forward victoriously by the ascending path of the supersexual. Chapter 10. The Sexual Fire. The sexual transmutation of the ens seminis into creative energy is possible when we carefully avoid the abominable spasm, the filthy orgasm of the fornicators. The bipolarization of this type of cosmic energy in the human organism was, since ancient times, analyzed in the initiatory colleges of Egypt, Mexico, Peru, Greece, Chaldea, Rome, Phoenicia, etc., etc., etc. The ascension of the seminal energy towards the brain takes place thanks to a certain pair of nerve fibers that, in the shape of an 8, unfolds splendidly to the left and right of the spine. We have arrived, then, at the caduceus of Mercury, with the wings of the spirit. Always open. This pair of nerve fibers will never be found by means of a scalpel, because they are of a semi-etheric, semi-physical nature. These are the two witnesses of the apocalypse, the two olives and the two candelabra that are in front of the god of the earth, and fire comes out of their mouth, devouring their enemies, if somebody wishes to harm them. In the sacred country of the Vedas, this pair of nerve fibers are known by the Sanskrit names of Ida and Pingla. The first is related to the left nasal cavity and the second to the right one. It is obvious that the first of these nadis or channels is of a lunar type. It is apparent that the second is of a solar nature. Many Gnostic students could be surprised by the fact that, even if Ida has a cold and lunar nature, it has its roots in the right testicle. Many disciples of our Gnostic movement would feel surprised by the fact that, in spite of Pingla being of a strictly solar type, it really starts at the left testicle. However, we should not be astonished, because everything in nature is based on the law of polarities. The right testicle finds its exact antipode in the left nasal cavity, and this is already demonstrated. The left testicle finds its perfect antipode in the right nasal cavity, and obviously this is the way it must be. Esoteric physiology teaches that in the feminine sex the two witnesses emerge from the ovaries. It is unquestionable that the order of this pair of olives of the temple becomes harmoniously inverted in women. Ancient traditions that emerge from the deep night of all ages say that when the solar and lunar atoms of the seminal system make contact in the tribene near the coccyx, then by simple electrical induction a third forces wakens up. I wish to refer to the marvelous fire of love. It is written in the old texts of the ancient wisdom that the inferior orifice of the medullary channel in common people is hermetically sealed. The seminal vapors open it so that the sacred fire of sexuality enters this way. Along the medullary channel a marvelous set of varied channels can be found that interpenetrate without getting mixed up because they are situated in different dimensions. Let us remember the Sushumna and others, such as the Vajra, the Chitra, the Centralis, and the famous Brahmanadi. The fire of sexual delight ascends by this last one if we never commit the crime of spilling the semen. It is absurd to emphasize the mistaken belief that the erotic fire of all happiness starts the return trip towards the coccyx after the incarnation of being, the Jivatma, in the heart of man. It is a horrible untruth to affirm clumsily that the divine flame of love, after having enjoyed its union with Paramashiva, separates during the return journey by the initial path. Such a fatal return, the descent towards the coccyx, is only possible when the initiate spills the semen, then he falls down fulminated by the terrible ray of the cosmic justice. The rise of the sexual fire by the medullary channel happens very slowly, according to the merits of the heart. The cardiac fires wisely control the miraculous ascent of the flame of love. Obviously, this erotic flame is not something automatic or mechanic, as many sincerely but mistakenly suppose. This serpentine fire is awakened exclusively by sexual delight that is truthful and loving. The erotic flame of couples united by mere personal convenience would never rise by their medullary channels. The ascent of the holy flame in the spines of adulterous men and women would be impossible. The fire of sexual delight would never rise in the spines of those who betray their guru. The sexual fire would never rise by the medullary channels of drunks, effeminates, lesbians, drug addicts, assassins, thieves, liars, slanderers, exploiters, the greedy, blasphemous, sacrilegious people, etc., etc., etc. The fire of sexual delight is like a wondrous serpent that emits when awakened a sound similar to that of a viper being egged on with a stick. The sexual fire, whose Sanskrit name is Kundalini, develops, revolutionizes and ascends into the resplendent aura of the Mahachohan. The ascent of the flame of glowing happiness along the spinal channel, from vertebra to vertebra, degree by degree, is actually very slow. It would never ascend instantaneously, as some persons who do not have the correct information mistakenly suppose. It is clear that the 33 degrees of the occult masonry correspond. esoterically with the 33 spinal vertebrae. When the alchemist commits the crime of spilling the cup of Hermes I am, referring to seminal discharge, he obviously loses Masonic degrees because the fire of amorous delights descends one or more vertebrae, according to the magnitude of the fault. It is extremely difficult to recover lost degrees. It is written in the Cathedral of the Soul, however, that there is more joy for one sinner that repents than for 1,000 righteous people who have no need of repentance. In the teaching of love we are always assisted by the Elohim. They advise and help us. The Adhyatmic University of the Wise examines periodically the candidates who, after having renounced mammon, intellectualism and material riches, enjoy wisely the delights of love in the nuptial bed. The key to the redemption is found in the medulla and the semen, and everything that does not take this path is in fact a waste of time. The serpentine fire, Kundalini, is twisted, like any snake, in 3.5 turns in a certain magnetic center situated in the coccyx, at the base of the spine. When the sexual serpent awakens to initiate its progress inside and above, we go through 6 transcendental mystical experiences that we can and should clearly define with 6 Sanskrit terms as follows. Ananda, certain spiritual happiness. Kampan, hypersensibility of an electrical and psychic type. Uthin, progressive increase of the self-consciousness, astral projection. Transcendental mystical experiences in the superior worlds, etc. Gurney, intense yearnings for the divine. Murcha, states of lassitude, relaxation of the muscles and nerves during meditation in a natural and spontaneous manner. Nidra, a specific mode of dreaming that, combined with interior deep meditation, becomes a shining samadhi, ecstasy. Unquestionably, the fire of love confers on us infinite transcendental powers. The sexual flame is a truth in both systems of beliefs, associated with the Vedas and with Jehovah. The sexual flame is the goddess of the word worshipped by the wise men. When awakened, it confers illumination on us. The erotic flame confers on us that divine wisdom that is not of the mind and is beyond time. She gives also the mukti of the final beatitude and the jnana of liberation. Dionysios. Dionisio, Dionysus. Dividing into syllables this magic word, this mantra of wonders, extraordinarily becomes the voluntary transmutation of the libido during paradisiac coitus. Magic results of this mantra. Di, intensified vibration of the creative organs. On, intelligent movement of the creative energy in the whole of the sexual nervous system until being submerged in the consciousness. Is, this mantric syllable reminds us of the Isis mysteries and their corresponding name, Isis. Obviously, the vowel I and the letter S, prolonged by means of a sweet and peaceful whistle, invokes the sexual serpent so that it ascends victorious by the medullary spinal channel. Io Isolda, the androgynous lunar solar being, Osiris Isis, glints from the deep bottom of all ages, terrifyingly divine. I, with its deep meaning, is certainly the lingam, phallus, the Hebrew ayad. O is the eternal feminine, the uterus, yoni, the famous Hebrew he. Io. The integral transmutation of the libido takes place when we intone this last syllable of the magic word during the sexual moment. Thus the igneous serpent of our magic powers awakens to start its exodus by the medullar channel. The maternal aspect of the sacred flame stands out, patent and clear, as in a serpentine form it ascends along the spine. Flame in a serpentine shape, divine sexual flame, most sacred Mother Kundalini. Outside the physical body, our cosmic mother particular to each of us, since everybody has his own, always assumes the marvelous presence of a Virgin Mother. Once, no matter exactly when, I was outside the physical body, and found myself with my sacred mother in the interior of a precious enclosure. After the usual embraces between son and mother, she sat down on a comfortable armchair opposite to me. I took advantage of the opportunity to ask some very necessary questions. Am I doing well now, my mother? Yes, my son, you are doing well. Is it still necessary to practice sexual magic? Yes, you still need it. Is it possible that somebody, there in the physical world, can find self-realization without the need for sexual magic? The answer to this last question was very strong and clear. Impossible, my son, that is not possible. I confess frankly and in plain language that I was amazed by these words from the adorable. I remembered then with supreme pain the many pseudo-esotericists and pseudo-occultists truly yearning for the final liberation, but ignorant of the Sahaja Methuna, the sexual magic, the marvelous key to the great arcanum. There is no doubt that the way to the abyss is paved with good intentions. Chapter 11. The Sacred Cow. Before the second Transalpine catastrophe that fundamentally altered the configuration of the Earth crust, there existed an old continent that today lies submerged under the tempestuous waters of the Atlantic Ocean. I am referring in an emphatic manner to Atlantis, concerning which one can find many traditions in many places. If not, consider the foreign names with Atlantean roots or with roots from the barbarous tongues, as those cretinous Greeks used to say, who also wanted to assassinate Anaxagoras when he dared to state that the sun was a little bigger than half of the Peloponnese. Names, I repeat, translated into the Egyptian language by the Saphic priests, and returned to their original meaning by the divine Plato, by further translating them wonderfully into the Attic language. Consider the adamantine thread of the millennial tradition from the original Atlantean people to Solon, continuing then with the two Christias and Master Plato. Consider, I tell you, the extraordinary descriptions of botany, geography, zoology, mineralogy, politics, religion, customs, etc., of the people from Atlantis. Look also with the eyes of a rebel eagle at the veiled references to the first divine kings from that ancient antediluvian continent, to which so many allusions appear in the pagan Mediterranean world as well as in the sacred ancient texts from the Oriental world. One can find detailed accounts concerning these sublime kings in the astonishing notes of Diodoro Siculo, which are still waiting to be studied. Finally, consider in this is the most interesting case the same sacrifice of the sacred cow characteristic of the Brahmins, the Hebrews, the Muslims, the European Gentiles and thousands of other nations. It is unquestionable that our famed bullfights are really but an ancestral, very ancient survival of that Atlantean festivity of sacrifice, whose description can be found in many archaic secret books. There are many legends in the world concerning those bulls that were released in the temple of Neptune, animals that were not subdued brutally as is done today, with lances and swords, but with lassos and other ingenious arts of classic bullfighting. Once the symbolic beast was subjugated in the sacred bull ring, it was immolated in honor of the holy gods of Atlantis, who, as Neptune himself, had involuted from the primitive solar state until they became beings of a lunar type. The classic art of the bullfight is certainly something initiatory, and is related to the mysterious cult of the sacred cow. Look at the Atlantean bull ring in the temple of Neptune, and at the present-day ring. They are certainly nothing more than a living zodiac, in which the honorable public sits down. The initiator or hierophant is the master, the banderilleros 3 are the companions. The picadors, in turn, are the apprentices, who go on the horse that is, with all of their weight on its untamed body so that, sometimes, it falls dead during the hard struggle. The companions start feeling superior to the beast, to the animal ego, when they put the banderillas, that is, they have become already, in the manner of Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, the persecutors of the secret enemy. In the meanwhile the master, dressed in the cape of his hierarchy, dominating Maya and gripping in his right hand the flaming sword of the will, is like the god Krishna of that old poem, not the prosecutor, but the killer of the ego, of the beast, the horrifying bellowing monster that was observed in Camelot or Kamaloka by King Arthur, supreme chief of the illustrious knights of the Round Table. The glittering Atlantean bullfighting is, therefore, a regal art, deeply meaningful since it shows us through its brilliant symbolism the hard work that is necessary to lead us to the dissolution of the ego. Any backward look related to esoteric bullfighting will doubtless lead us to mystical findings of a transcendental order. It is important to refer to the deep love that the bullfighter feels for his virgin. It is clear that he gives himself totally to her before appearing with his bullfighter costume in the bull ring. This reminds us of the Isiac mysteries, the terrible sacrifice of the sacred cow and the archaic cults of Io, whose origins can be traced to the dawn of life in our planet Earth. It is moving, clear and definite, that only Io, Devi Kundalini, the sacred cow with 5 legs, the Divine Mother, truly possesses that magic serpentine power that permits us to reduce to cosmic dust the animal ego, the bellowing beast of the ring of existence. The vowels Io constitute in themselves the number 10 associated with generation, and the ratio of the circumference to the diameter. Obviously Io is therefore the number pi, Pidhar, the tremendous masculine. Feminine mystery. Io is also the swastika, Fohat, or the transcendent sexual electricity that are represented by the cross inside a circle, a symbol of the earth, about which a whole book could be written. It is written with letters of fire in the book of life that such a symbol as the swastika, in the shape of a mathematical coordinator, has existed in all countries of the world since the night of the centuries. It is necessary that with the utmost urgency we become cowherds, that is, wise guides of the sacred cow. The venerable great master HPB actually saw, in India, an authentic cow with 5 legs. It was a true caprice of nature, an immaculate miracle, white, ineffable. Mr. Mario Rosso de Luna has said that that singular creature carried the 5th leg on its back, and used it to scare flies away, or to scratch itself. This curious animal was led by a young man of the sadhu section. Exclusively the milk of this mysterious cow nourished this lad. The esoteric symbolism, wonderful and glorious, of the cow with 5 legs is obvious and manifest. Lively, clear expression of the 5 unfolding of our Divine Mother Kundalini, very special. Let us remember the sign of the infinite, the 8 lying down horizontally and equated to a 5, which means, read literally, infinity equals 5 foot, that is, the infinity equals the pentalpha, the ineffable cow of the 5 legs, the star with the 5 points, or regular star-like pentagon, that stopped Mephistopheles when he came up in response to the invocation of Dr. Faustus. It is indispensable for the good of everybody and of each of our students to define these 5 aspects. A. The unmanifested Kundalini. B. Ineffable Isis, chaste Diana, wisdom, love, power. C. The Greek Hecate, the Egyptian Proserpine, the Aztec Coatlicue, the queen of hell and death. Terror of love and law. D. The particular individual Mother Nature, the one that created our physical body. E. The elemental instinctive magician, the one that originated our instincts. The cowherd, the guide of the sacred cow, can and must work in the teaching of these 5 powers of the sacred cow, the pentalpha. I solemnly and emphatically declare the following: I work directly with the 5 powers of the sacred cow. It is a duty to illustrate, clarify, and teach about the pentalpha. I prefer to do this by means of living stories. First story. It is said that there is but one step between the sublime and the ridiculous, and this is axiomatic. Remember for a moment the Bacchantes when they were in a state of orgiastic rage. Feminine beauties polarized positively with the Dionysian wave, nymphs from the forests and mountains pursued by the lascivious Silenus. Look now at the ridiculous Maenads, negatively polarized with the wave of Dionysus. Dancers unbridled in the rage of their sacred madness. Hippie women from ancient Greece. Female prostitutes excited by drugs, in full Dionysian drunkenness. The human and animal sacrifices made them even more dangerous. The lusty Maenads killed Orpheus, and the wonderful lyre fell on the temple. Pavement broken up. Once I was telling my friends comic episodes related to a bohemian past. Obviously, the fermented fruit of the vine and the Bacchantes at the height of their orgiastic rage were not lacking there. Ridiculous scenes of times gone by, when I walked the world of Kali Yuga as a fallen bodhisattva. However, there are stellar moments for humanity. A cosmic reminder is truly very necessary. Outside the physical vehicle, in the astral body, I entered the subterranean world, below the Euclidean 3-dimensional zone. What happened then was very frightful. What I saw there in the horrible submerged region was the same that had been seen before by people like Hoffman, Edgar Allan Poe, Blavatsky, Bulwer Lytton, the same things depicted with the distress of the poet by Espronceda, with his demoniac choirs composed of the discordant voices of those that sail without direction the ship of life, trusting like madmen on the wind of the passions and on the sinister sea of doubt towards good deeds, of those that fatally marry with destiny, of those proud people that want to build towers, of babble of stupid ambitions, of those that lie, of those that fight for worldly glory, of those that stain themselves in the pleasures of the orgy, of those that covet gold, of those idle people that hate creative and fruitful work, of the villains, of the hypocrites and other victims of the Proteus of selfishness. There appeared claws, teeth, horns, trunks, shafts, tails, serrated wings, lacerating rings that threatened to obliterate me as the lowest worm. At that moment many horrible sounds arrived at my magic ears: screams, howling, whistles, neighing, chirping, mooing, squawks, meows, barking, spitting and snoring. I found myself submerged in the mud of all that misery. Distress overtook me. I waited anxiously for a balm to cure my aching heart. The lucubrations of those great seers of the astral, the alchemists, Kabbalists, occultists, esotericists, yogis, Gnostics, or simply poets, were not in vain. Suddenly something unusual happens beyond the muddy waters of Acheron. The horrible door that gives access to the home of Pluto turns on its hinges. Feeling intensely moved, I tremble and have a premonition that something terrible has happened. I am not wrong. I see her. The unmanifested Kundalini has crossed over the threshold of the place where the lost souls live. Magnificent, excellent, extraordinary, divine Madonna, she approaches me with a magisterial step. I do not know what to do. I feel simultaneously fear and love. Cosmic reminder? Recrimination? The adorable one speaks with a voice from paradise, blesses me and then continues her way as if progressing towards the dreaded walls of the city of Dite. In the depths of my consciousness I felt at that time as if she also wanted to help others that live around the city of pain, where we cannot enter anymore without just indignation. It is said that Dante, looking out from the high tower with a flaming pinnacle, saw the three infernal furies suddenly appear, and that they had feminine movements and organs. I remembered all this instantaneously. In no way did I want being a miserable mortal made from the mud of the earth to become one more inhabitant of the city of pain. Luckily, I experienced the immense happiness of being able to get out from the entrails of the Avern and appear in the sunlight. Early in the morning of another day somebody knocks at my door. It is an old secondary school teacher. That good gentleman invites me to a graduation party. His daughter has finished her studies with great success. It is impossible to decline his invitation. He is my friend and I even owe him some services. There is no way in which I am prepared to refuse him. After all the usual personal grooming, Lytolantes and my insignificant, worthless person left our home with the intention of going to the house of the teacher. Many people, smartly dressed, received us very cordially in the great house. Delectable music could be heard in the room. Happy people went here and there. Delighted couples danced on the soft carpet. Several times my splendid host came to us to offer us the fermented wine. I saw over and over again from close by the brilliant glasses of delicate baccarat. However, I emphatically rejected Bacchus and his orgies. I felt, in my heart, remorseful. My host became caustic, incisive, and even a bit hurtful. Unquestionably, he became my worst enemy, supposing wrongly that I had snubbed his party. Later on, he spread several libelous lies against me, and hurled against my insignificant person all of the venom of his criticisms. Not happy with all of this, he resorted to public calumny, accusing me in front of the tribunals of justice of supposed crimes of which I am still ignorant. That gentleman died later in an unfortunate automobile accident. I now believe that in the party I behaved like an immature beginner. I lacked diplomacy. There are guests in all the drawing rooms of the world that know how to play with the devil. They spend the whole night holding a glass, and they defend themselves in a marvelous manner. They pretend to drink each time there is a new toast, but in reality, they do not. Drink, they mock the demon of alcohol. Second story. We move now to a very singular story, in which we will not refer to marvelous meals or to banquets in the manner of Heliogabalus. What a restful life for the one who escapes from mundane strife and follows the hidden path on where have walked the few wise men who in the world have lived. Let not your heart be confused as the great arrogant condition neither of the golden ceilings rests. Be wondrous whose construction by the wise Moor is on Jasper's foundation. The huntress Venus, descending from the high mountains with the purpose of helping her son Aeneas, the Trojan hero who has disembarked in the country of Libya, evokes unusual memories in me. Isis, Adonia, Tonantzin, the second aspect of my divine mother Kundalini, came to me faster than a gust of air from Eurus. She did not have the typical face of a mortal, but had a beauty impossible to define in words, and appeared to be a sister of Phoebus Apollo. I was in her loving immaculate arms. The adorable appeared to be a grievous woman, like the one from the biblical Christian gospel. I was hungry, and she gave me food, thirsty, and she gave me drink, I was ill, and she cured me. It is impossible to forget her words, my son, without me, you would be totally orphaned in the hour of death. Then she continued, saying, you, without me, would be totally alone in this world. What would your life be without me? Later on, I repeated, certainly, without you, my mother, I would be an orphan. I recognize fully that without your presence I would find myself completely alone at the time of death. Life becomes a desert when one has died in oneself. Without the help of our Divine Mother Kundalini in the entire presence of our being, we would find ourselves internally orphaned. Oh, adorable Mother! You have manifested the prana, the electricity, the force, the magnetism, the cohesion, and the gravitation in this universe. You are the divine cosmic energy hidden inside the hidden depths of each creature. O Mahasarasvati! O Mahalakshmi! You are the ineffable wife of Shiva, the Holy Ghost. Third story. The legend of the celestial cow, whose milk is ambrosia, life, and immortality, is something with a solid foundation, and us the adepts, like the divine Gautama or the Buddha leader of the cow, work very seriously with the teaching of the 5 aspects of Devi Kundalini. We Gnostics very much enjoy eating the apples of gold or of Freya, that give immortality to the gods. We drink, happily, the liquor of the soma or biblical manna, with which we feel so comforted and vigorous as in the best moments of our youth. A certain cosmic, transcendental event comes to my memory as I am writing these lines. Many years ago, in a night of the full moon, I was transported to an extraordinary monastery of the Universal White Brotherhood. How happy I felt in that mansion of love! Certainly, there is no greater pleasure than the feeling that the soul is detached. At those instants time does not exist and past and future join in an eternal now. Following my friends along royal chambers and galleries, we arrived at a cool courtyard, a miniature copy of that of the lions in the Alhambra. A charming courtyard in which whispered, among flowers never seen or heard of, several fountains like those at the divine fountain of Castalia. However, the best shone at the center of the courtyard, and I contemplated it with the mystical surprise of a penitent and anchorite. I wish to refer emphatically to the stone of truth. This had then a divine human form. Sexual prodigy of the blessed goddess Mother Death, a funeral, spectral marvel. The third aspect of my divine mother Kundalini, a stony living sculpture, tremendous representation of that which frightens mortals so much. In plain language, I confess in the presence of divine and humans that I embraced the terrible goddess Death in total Dionysian drunkenness. It was essential for me to become reconciled with the law. Thus, I had been told by the brothers of the Order of St. John, those venerable ones that in themselves had already achieved the Hyperborean mystery. When that cosmic festival was over, I had to meet with some ladies and gentlemen from the Holy Grail in the refectory of the monastery. With much secret and great enthusiasm, all the brothers commented on the extraordinary event during the dinner. Unquestionably, the animated stones that in ancient Arcady radically modified the way of thinking of the sage Pausanias can be classified in two kinds, ophites and siderites, the stone serpent and the stone star. Eusebio, especially, was never separated from his ophites, which he carried in his breast, and received oracles from, uttered by a small voice that appeared to be a slight whistle. Arnobio tells that whenever he found a stone of this kind he never failed to ask it questions, which were answered by the stone in a small but clear and sharp voice. Hecate, Proserpine, Coatlicue, in living animated stone, appeared to me as if she had sprouted from the field of death or from a grave in Karnak. Fourth story. What is actually known by most people about shamanism is very little, and even that has been adulterated, in the same way as the rest of the non-Christian religions. It is sometimes called the paganism of Mongolia for no reason whatsoever, since it is one of the most ancient Indian religions, that is, the cult of the spirit, the belief in the immortality of souls and that these, beyond death, continue exhibiting the same characteristics of the men that they animated on earth, even if their bodies have lost, because of death, their objective form, changing the physical form for the spiritual one. In its present form, such a belief is a shoot of primitive theurgy and a practical fusion of the visible world with the invisible. When a foreigner naturalized in the country wishes to enter in communication with his invisible brothers, he has to assimilate their nature, that is, must find these beings by moving halfway along the way which separates them, and enriched then by them with a plentiful provision of spiritual essence, must give them in turn a part of his physical nature, to put them in this way in a position of being able to show themselves sometimes in a semi-objective form, which they usually lack. Such a process entails a temporary change in natures and is usually known as theurgy. Vulgar people call the shamans sorcerers, because they are said to evoke the spirits of the dead with the objective of practicing necromancy, but true shamanism cannot be judged by its degenerate ramifications in Siberia, in the same way that the religion of Gautama Buddha cannot be confused with the fetishism of some self-appointed henchmen in Siam and Burma. Unquestionably, magic invocations become simpler and more effective when one operates magically with the physical body totally submerged in the fourth dimension. If after going halfway into the path that separates us from our loved beings we can find our loved dead ones face to face, it would obviously be easier to accomplish this by going on for the totality of the path. With the physical body submerged inside the fourth dimension, we can, as Jamblichus, invoke the holy gods to converse with them personally. However, it is clear that we need with maximum urgency a point of support, a lever that permits us to jump with the physical body and all that to the fourth dimension. It is appropriate to cite here that famous phrase of Archimedes, "Give me a point of support and I will move the universe." In the 8th chapter of this book we talked with much emphasis about the magic agent of the jinn states, I want to refer clearly to the fourth aspect of Devi Kundalini. This is the point of support for the fourth vertical. At the time in which I write these lines, some remembrances come to my mind, magnificent divine evocations. It happened that during an autumnal night I decided to drink of the wine of meditation from the glass of perfect concentration. The motive for my meditation was my particular Mother Nature, the fourth aspect of the igneous serpent of our magic powers. To pray is to converse with God, and I talked to the adorable begging her with silent words to take me with my physical body to the terrestrial paradise, the fourth dimension. What soon happened in that night of mystery was astonishing. Assisted by the ineffable one, I rose from my bed. When I left my home and went out into the street, I was able to prove that my physical body had penetrated into the fourth dimension. She took me to the deepest forests of the Eden, where rivers of pure water abound with milk and honey. Virgin, Lady of the wooded heights. Everything turns silent before you. The uncultivated Iberia, the Gaul that even when even dying challenges, grim, and the ferocious soldier who, humiliated, finally giving up his arms still respects you. Adorable Madonna of mine, by the gods who from the high heaven govern the mortals on earth, I implore your help. The face of my Mother Nature was like that of a heavenly beauty, impossible to describe in human words. Her hair seemed to be a golden waterfall falling deliciously on her alabaster shoulders. Her body was like that of mythological Venus. Her hands, with conical beautiful fingers full of precious gems, had the Christic form. I talked to the adorable in the forest, and she told me things that earthly beings cannot understand. My mother shone, sublime, in the etheric world, in the fourth vertical, in the fourth dimension. If, therefore, nothing gives relief for the aching breast, not the marble from Phrygia, not the magnificent purple, it is better to seek refuge in the delicious bosom of your particular and individual divine Mother Nature. She is the author of our days, the true artist of our physical body. It was her who joined the ovum with the sperm in the human laboratory so that life would arise. She is the creator of the germinal cell with its 48 chromosomes. Without her, the cells of the embryo would not have multiplied and the organs would not have been formed. Even if your soul is warped by suffering, stand firm, O disciple, and give yourself humbly to your Mother Nature. Fifth story. I want to see Ocean and Thetis, to whom we owe our existence, inside the terrestrial mansion. The loves of Jupiter with the Virgin Io, who was transformed into the celestial calf or sacred cow of the Orientals to escape the rages of Juno, is something that has very deep significance. From here, then, the first Jupiter of the Greek theogony, father of all the gods, lord of the universe and brother of Uranus or Uranus, that is, the early fire and water, since it is known, according to the classics, that there were about 300 Jupiters in the Greek pantheon. In his other aspect of Jove or Iadiv, he is the male-female Jehovah, collective androgynes of Elohim of the Mosaic books, Adam Kadmon of the Kabbalist, the Iho or Inacho of the Anatolia, who is also Dionysus, whose vibratory wave has become very intense with the entry of the sun in the brilliant constellation of Aquarius. Jesus, the great Kabir, never paid homage to the anthropomorphic Jehovah of the Jewish masses. Talion's law, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth of the vengeful Jehovah was followed by the law of love. Love each other as I have loved you. If we examine the sacred scriptures with mystical enthusiasm, we can clearly prove the obvious and manifest fact that the anthropomorphic Hebraic Jehovah does not appear in any of the four Gospels. Ramio, Mary, the Divine Mother Kundalini, always accompanied the adorable, and there, in the Mount of the Skulls, we see her at the feet of the cross. My Father, forgive them because they do not know what they are doing, cries the divine Rabbi of Galilee from the majestic heights of Calvary. Unquestionably, the blessed Lord of Perfections only adored his Father who is in secret and his Divine Mother Kundalini. In other words, we shall say, the great Kabir, Jesus deeply loved Iadhiv, the interior divine male-female. Iad is certainly the particular individual monad of each one, the Hindustani Shiva, the arch-hierophant and arch-magician, the firstborn of creation, the golden fleece, the treasure we must take hold of after defeating the dragon of darkness. Hiv is the unfolding of Iad, the divine wife of Shiva, our individual mother. Kundalini, the sacred cow with 5 legs, the esoteric mystery of the Pentalpha. Jupiter and his cow of Io have exact concomitance with the Iadhiv, the divine interior divine couple of each creature. We have studied 4 aspects of the sacred cow of Io. We continue now with the 5th mystery. In the esoteric path, there are cosmic intervals of a transcendent and transcendental nature. After having become a member of the Temple of the Twice-Born, I had to go through one of those intervals. I want to refer in an emphatic manner to a sexual suspension, to a period of abstention that lasted for several years. In the meantime, I devoted myself exclusively to deep interior meditation. Objective, to dissolve the psychological I, the myself, the oneself, which is certainly a node in the cosmic energy, a link we must reduce to a cosmic dust cloud. It seemed to me fundamental to understand in a complete way each one of my psychological defects, but I wanted to go a bit further in the meditation path. Understanding is not everything. We need to capture the deep significance of what we have understood with maximal, pressing urgency. Any devotee of the real path could have had the pleasure of understanding a psychological defect in every territory of the mind, without however having achieved the perception of its deep significance. Trying to understand my own defects in all the innermost recesses of my mind, I decided to become an enemy of myself. Each defect was studied separately in a very methodical way. I never committed the error of wanting to catch 10 hares at the same time. In no way did I want to risk a failure. The meditation became exhaustive, turning deeper each time, and when I felt myself weakening, I let my mind turn quiet and silent as if waiting for a revelation. The truth came forth at those instants. I captured thus what is apart from time, the deep significance of the defect having been understood in an integral manner. Afterwards I prayed, begged with vehemence to my Divine Mother Kundalini to eliminate from my mind the psychic aggregate, the psychological defect just identified. In this way, little by little, with this didactic, with this modus operandi, I managed during that pause to eliminate 50% of the subjective, human elements that we carry with us and constitute the ego, the I. However, it is evident that everything in life has its limit. There are scales and scales, degrees and degrees. This work became frightfully difficult when I had to confront the oldest human elements. Unquestionably, my Divine Mother needed a superior kind of armament. I remembered the lance of Eros, the marvelous emblem of transcendent sexuality, but I found myself experiencing a pause. What to do? I had already been given a cosmic list of things to obtain, and a certain categorical imperative demanded that I go down again to the burning forge of Vulcan, the sex, but I had not understood. I had been transported to the mountains of mystery. I had seen the terrible forces of the great arcanum in action. In vain I fought against the categorical imperative of the Dionysian waves. They were frightfully divine, omnipotent. These supernatural powers appeared to constitute an apocalyptic disaster. I felt as if such forces could make the earth burst into pieces. When I wanted to search, investigate, inquire about the origin of such forces and sexual powers, I found myself face to face with the elemental magician, with my Divine Mother Kundalini in her fifth aspect. She was very beautiful, though quite small, the size of a gnome or a pygmy. She was dressed in a white tunic and long black cape that dragged along the ground. Her head was covered with a very special magical headdress. Next to one of the two columns symbolizing the occult masonry, the adorable ordered me to undertake a new descent into the ninth sphere, the sex. Unluckily, I had believed that this was a trial, and thus I continued to disobey. I was certainly slow in understanding, and that was slowing me down. After some time passed, during which I was engaged in mortal struggles against a very infrahuman psychical aggregate that resisted violently its own disappearance, I had to appeal to the lance of Longinus. There was no other solution. I appealed to the transcendental sexual electricity, supplied to my Divine Mother Kundalini during metaphysical copulation. I asked her to grasp the lance of Eros. The result was extraordinary. My sacred mother, armed then with the holy pike, with the divine shaft, with the electrical sexual power, was able to reduce to cosmic dust the horrible monster, the psychical aggregate that I had in vain tried to dissolve far from the chemical coitus. In this way I abandoned my sexual pause and returned to the forge of Cyclops. Working with the holy shaft, I managed to reduce to cosmic dust every infrahuman element that constituted the ego. The fifth aspect of Devi Kundalini gives us the sexual potency, the instinctive, natural force, etc., etc., etc. Thank you.